Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started on our metamorphosis lesson. Before you go any further, make sure you either have the notes that I attached to the JournoPod printed out, so they would look just like we have in class, or if you're going to do the handwritten notes, make sure you have notebook paper as well as a pen or a pencil ready to go. If you're handwriting your notes, here's how you should set them up. You want to have your name up here, then the notes number up here. However, this is wrong. I made this before I was able to catch the error. This should say notes number 5. Okay? Then you'll have your title up here for Metamorphosis Notes, and then I want you to go ahead and divide your page into 2 sections so you can put the topic on one side and then the notes on the other, just like they would be if I had printed them off and given them to you in person. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Many animals go through change as they grow. If I were to tell you to give me an example of an animal, most of you would give me an animal that looks very different from a baby to when they are an adult. May not look a whole lot different, but they certainly won't look exactly the same, most likely. One of the most common ones that many of you have already spent time studying, especially in 3rd grade, I believe, is the frog cycle. Okay, if you did study that, I want you to go ahead and pause the video for a second. I want you to try and think of the 4 phases of a frog's life cycle. So go ahead and hit pause and think of those now. Okay, so here's the 4 phases. This is going to be the first phase, eggs. If you remember from the classification unit, all animals start as eggs, whether they be eggs that are laid outside of the animal and then they hatch later, like a bird or a reptile, or if they just start from an egg cell and then are given birth in a live form, like mammals and things like that. All animals will start as an egg, and the same is true for frogs. Second stage is the tadpole. Okay, this looks very similar to what an adult frog would look like. However, he only has the front legs, the hind legs are not developed, and he also has a tail. This is because the tadpole spends the early part of its life in the water. It is an amphibian, so it's born in water and then moves on to land as an adult. That's why he has a tail in his early stages and then loses the tail by his adult stage. This is the 3rd stage of the frog life cycle, called the froglet or the metamorph. I believe there's also some other names used out there, but froglet makes the most sense to me because it's frog-like, but it's not exactly the same thing as a frog. You can see the hind legs are beginning to develop from the tadpole phase, and the tail that was there is beginning to shrink. And then finally, in the 4th phase, you'll have the full-fledged adult frog. Now, that's a common example of just one animal that goes through some type of cycle or pattern throughout its life. Today, we're going to talk about 2 different kinds of cycles and patterns in animals and in nature, and those are metamorphosis. Okay, 2 different types that we'll get to in just a minute. Now, one thing I want to note about metamorphosis is this is specific to only insects. Okay, oftentimes students will say, "Oh, Miss Horsling, how do humans fit into metamorphosis?" Well, we don't because we're not insects. These different phases of metamorphosis only apply to insects. So all of the examples, all of the pictures that you're going to see in this lesson all have to do with insects. So first we're going to break down the word just a little bit. There's 3 different parts we're going to look at. The first one is meta, which as you can see here means changed after or beyond. So that's a Greek root there. The next one is morph, M-O-R-P-H. You may have heard this word used in conversation, something morphing into something else. That has to do with a change in structure or form. Then we have the suffix osis, O-S-I-S. This is actually a suffix that we see quite frequently in science, and it means actions, conditions, or states. So if we translate this literally, it's change in the form and then the state of that change. So it makes a little more sense if I take my little pen here and if we start at osis first. It's the state of a change in form in an insect. Okay? Altogether then, the definition for metamorphosis is down here. It is the process of the structure of an insect's body changing and growing. Okay, so if this is the process of the change in structure of the insect, we're going to look at two different types. A complete metamorphosis, where the insect actually looks totally different as a adult than it did as an egg or in the earlier stages. And then we'll also look at incomplete metamorphosis, meaning there's not a complete change. There's some differences, but generally the structure looks exactly the same. If you're handwriting your notes, this is how your notes should look at this point. You need to have your general topic on the left column, what is metamorphosis, and then the more detailed notes on this side, on the right side of your divider line. And then just remember that this is not number 4, it's number 5, as I said earlier. If you're taking your handwritten notes, I suggest pausing the video until you get all of this written down exactly like I have it. If you were able to print the class version of the notes, you can either go back in the video to the slides that you still need to see, or if you're ready to go ahead and move on, feel free to do that as well. Okay, part of metamorphosis is the insect must shed its skin through a process called molting. Because an insect is encased in its exoskeleton, which cannot expand, it needs to shed its skin that it has outgrown and get a new one. This process is called molting. I want to point out this word here, exoskeleton. The prefix of that word, the beginning part exo, means outside of or on the outer parts. Skeleton, as we know, if we think about our human body skeleton, is the bone structure or kind of like the hard stuff that gives our body shape and protection. An exoskeleton then is like a skeleton on the outside of the body. Okay, so for an insect, an exoskeleton is what protects them, but it's on the outside of their body, not on the inside. That's why when you step on a cockroach or a beetle or some other kinds of bugs, you generally can either hear or feel like a crunch sound. That's because you're actually breaking that exoskeleton of the animal. And because these exoskeletons are hard, they're not stretchy like our skin or the fur of an animal. You know, if you kind of pinch and grab your skin, it kind of changes form or indents. You can kind of maybe pull it a little bit, but once you let go, it bounces right back to where it was. It's has what's called elasticity, meaning it's elastic. It doesn't just kind of permanently indent like Play-Doh or something. I can't remember where I was going with that. Oh, yes. So while our skin and many mammals coverings stretch and grow as the animal does, insects have a different problem. Their exoskeleton, which covers the whole outer part of their body, doesn't grow with them. Think of it like, let's take this lizard for example. The outer exoskeleton that he's actually molting off right now, it's like it doesn't stretch very well. It doesn't get any bigger. It's like he's wearing a shell on the outside of him. And if his body inside is going to grow, eventually it's going to need more space to stretch out. Well, that's going to happen. He has to get rid of that shell and then develop a new one. Kind of the same thing with the hermit crabs, the video that we watched. If the hermit crab gets too big for its shell, it will kind of ditch it and then look for another one that it can fit into until that one gets too big. It's kind of like going to get a new pair of pants every year that you grow, or a new pair of shoes or something. They don't really grow with you. You have to get new ones. Same process with molting here. I can hear some of you at home going, ew, Miss Dorsling, this is so gross. And it is. But this is a really great picture of molting. Okay, over here on the left, this kind of darker brown, this is the old skeleton, basically, of the bug. And on this side, this is the new, oh, this is getting messy. Let me erase this one over here. Okay, this is the new bug kind of emerging. Now, you ask this person, why does he look so white and pale and mushy looking? Well, it's the same thing that happens when we get a scab or a burn, or even if we get a sunburn and start peeling. That skin underneath is very new, very fresh, and it takes a little while for that skin to harden up and kind of turn back the same color as the rest of our body. Same thing with the bug. He's just breaking out of this old exoskeleton, so it'll take a little while for his new exoskeleton to kind of dry off and turn into the darker color that he was before. So there are two types of metamorphosis, incomplete and complete. Okay, we're going to look at both of those in just a minute. But the incomplete metamorphosis, as I mentioned before, is the process of the change of the structure. Okay, so if it's an incomplete change of structure, that means that from the early stage, from the egg and the nymph and the adult, which we'll get to those phases in just a little bit, there's really not a whole lot of change here. Okay, let me see if it makes it a little bit easier for you to see. From here to here, it looks like the exact same bug, just bigger. Okay, it's not like it has developed any new body features. It still has legs, it still has its abdomen, still has the antenna and the head and the eyeballs and everything else. The only difference is its wings have developed now. But even in some of the prior phases, you can see the wing, like you can see the wings starting to grow here and here as well. So the point is that from phase to phase, the bug looks pretty much the exact same, just only bigger. Okay. For complete metamorphosis, however, if you have a complete change in form of the insect as he develops, then you have something that looks totally different from stage to stage. This right here, this is the larva stage, looks totally different from this right here, the adult phase. Okay. One has wings, the other doesn't. One has, antenna, one doesn't. One has lots and lots of legs, one doesn't. Okay, just depends on the type of organism there. But that's the main difference. The incomplete, that doesn't look a whole lot different from kind of baby to adult, while the complete, it does look completely different. And we'll talk about how and why in just a little bit. So if you're handwriting your notes, here's where you should be right now. All we've added so far is this bottom down here. Two types of metamorphosis, incomplete and complete. Incomplete metamorphosis. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about each one. There are three distinct stages. The first stage is eggs. All insects hatch from eggs. Like I mentioned before, if you remember from the taxonomy unit, every single animal is going to come from an egg. Same thing with an insect. So insects actually hatch, meaning the egg is laid outside of the body. It develops or ripens, kind of, so to speak. And then when it's ready, the insect will hatch. Here on the left, we have spined soldier bug eggs. These guys are really cool. When they turn into an adult, they actually have like what looks like almost like a spined or like spiky kind of shield on their back. It looks really cool. I don't have a picture of the adult in this lesson, but still pretty cool. And then on the right side over here, we have a picture of some monarch butterfly eggs. Typically, these eggs are laid on the underside of the leaf, so not the top part that faces the sun, on the underside. And that's for a couple of reasons. A, it gives them a little more protection. B, hopefully predators can find them not quite as easily. I mean, it's not a great hiding spot, but it's better than being, kind of wide out in the open. And then lastly, it also helps kind of shield the eggs from the sun. That way they don't get fried or dried out. Second stage for incomplete is nymph. Now, I know this word looks a little funny. It's pretty fun to say, to be honest. But the nymph is the miniature version of the adult. And this is important, it does not have wings. Okay, during this stage, this is where the insect molts as it gets bigger and bigger. And with each molt, it will produce a larger, more mature nymph. So on this left-hand picture over here, we have the grasshopper nymph. And then on the right, we have the grasshopper adult. Okay, the left picture, the nymph, obviously looks pretty much the same as the adult, same similar body shape and structure, just the adult is a lot bigger. Now, a fun fact about grasshoppers and the difference between the nymph and the adult, the eyeballs are actually the same size. That is one part of the bug that does not grow, I believe, from what I can remember at least. But the eyeball here and the eyeball here is the exact same size. You just obviously, and that gives you a good perspective of how small the nymph is. And then imagine how many times he has to molt to get to the adult stage. Okay. Then the final stage for incomplete is the adult. This is the full-grown insect, but not a complete change in body form. Okay. Another example here of nymph and adult. On the left, we have the nymph version of the praying mantis. On the right, we have the adult version. Again, very similar body structure, just a lot bigger, obviously, on the adult side. Even on the nymph, you can see kind of the leaf below it that it's standing on. It's so far zoomed in that you can see all the different veins and kind of like vessels of the leaf down there. While on the right side, this adult is on bark, and you can, obviously, this is like the bark of a tree. So that kind of gives you a good perspective of what the size difference is there. But same number of legs, same body shape, same body structure, just more developed in the adult stage, and then obviously wings in the adult stage as well. Other examples for incomplete metamorphosis. We've got dragonflies. It's a pretty common example. That's this one right here. Roaches. This one right here, really gross. Termites, kinds of bug you would find eating wood. Most people are really worried about getting them in their houses when they buy houses. Maggots, and then obviously grasshopper, like we said earlier. You do want to make sure you're writing all of those down. If you are I went on to the back side. Your topic on the left is incomplete metamorphosis. On the right, you need to write these details. Don't worry about writing anything else. Just make sure it looks exactly like I have it here. If you have the class version, you're able to print those. Just make sure you're filling them out as we go. Okay. Moving on to complete metamorphosis. Once again, that is the process of the change in body form. Okay, I'm saying that over and over again because I really want you guys to understand what metamorphosis is. And then if you can kind of get that, then you can think, okay, well, if there's a complete change in body form, then that means it's going to look totally different. For complete metamorphosis, there are 4 stages instead of 3. The first one is the same though. First one is egg. And I believe it should have right here all insects hatch from eggs. Yikes, this is scary. It's hard to write with a computer mouse, I guess. Anyways, that would be the definition of egg for that first phase. It's the exact same as the incomplete metamorphosis. But the idea here is that obviously, if they're going to have complete metamorphosis, they're going to start from eggs. On the left side, this picture here, we actually have a picture of ants and ant eggs. Most people don't know that ants actually have a complete metamorphosis. It's pretty interesting. And then on the right side, we have the ladybug laying its eggs, again on the underside of the leaf, I believe. And that's another example of an insect that has a complete change. Pretty cool. In a minute, we're going to see a picture of the ladybug pupa, and it actually looks pretty stinking awesome. The second stage of complete metamorphosis is larva. Okay, this is not pronounced larvae. However, the AE on the end there is the Latin spelling. So you could, maybe just see LARVA, but it's still pronounced larva. And the main job of the larva stage is to eat and grow. Super important stage. To be honest, I kind of wish that was my main job in life too, but alas, it is not. But the larva stage, their main job is to eat and grow. If you've read the book Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar, where the caterpillar just eats and eats and eats and eats and eats, that's where this comes from, okay? Over here we have an example of the monarch butterfly larva, okay? You would see it and probably call it a caterpillar, hence the book Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar. But really all they do is eat, 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 and then when they get too big, they molt, shed their skin, get a little bit bigger, etc. Another example on the right side picture is a mealworm larva, okay? Another type of insect that will eat and eat and eat and eat until it reaches the third stage, which is pupa, okay? Again, this is not pronounced pupae, but I did give you the Latin spelling there. It's pronounced pupa, okay? This stage is not for eating and growing, but once they get to the stage where they're big enough, mature enough, have enough sort of nutrients, this is for rest and reconstruction of tissue, actually. So what it's going to do is it's going to break down the tissue inside of the caterpillar or mealworm or whatever insect it is, and then it will begin to reconstruct its tissue into whatever organism it will be as an adult. In your notes, whether you have the printed or handwritten copy, I do want you to circle the R in rest and the R in reconstruction. That will just help you remember, hopefully, that pupa stage is for rest and reconstruction. Quick note before we go into my really cool fact about pupa is the word pupa is Latin for the word doll, because insects at this stage actually kind of look like a doll wrapped up in a blanket. That's where the word comes from, but it is the stage where they rest and reconstruct. Now, what's actually super cool is when these insects what's happening is they actually molt. They do their last molt, and when the skin or the outer shell that they kind of let go of, I believe, is what becomes this kind of like glue, what attaches it to the tree branch. But inside of this, oops, that's not the eraser. Okay, inside of this like sleeping bag type deal here, if you actually were to cut it open at the proper time, what would come out is actually like a goopy liquid, okay? And this is why. Once the insect wraps itself up inside of this cocoon, it actually releases a digestive enzyme out of its body. And that enzyme actually works throughout the chrysalis or the cocoon or the pupa to break down the organism as if it's digesting itself. And it actually breaks it down into the molecules and cells that it's made out of, into like a molecule soup, so to speak. And then it rebuilds itself back into whatever the adult form of that organism is. Same thing with the ladybug pupa. Any pupa, really, in this stage releases a digestive enzyme. Inside of this little package here would be a bunch of goop until that pupa is then ready to emerge as an adult, because it's reconstructed all of those molecules again. I like to think about it or explain it like this. It's kind of like if I were to give you um, a bunch of Legos that I had already built into a castle, and then you took that castle and broke it down into the individual Legos and re-put them back together in a car or a shape of a car or anything else. Okay, it's kind of like that. The larva goes in shaped one way. Inside of the cocoon is where the magic happens. It kind of chemically digests itself, breaks it down, and then rebuilds back into the adult form of the organism. I do want to note, and it is in your notes as well, that this is a common mistake. The pupa stage for a butterfly is not a cocoon, but it is a chrysalis. Okay, that is something you need to know. And then for a moth, that's where it's called a cocoon. Okay, on the left side, this picture over here, this is a picture of a blue morpho butterfly in its pupa stage. This is a blue morpho chrysalis. And then this on the right side is the Luna moth cocoon, okay, what it would look like in its pupa stage. And what's interesting is as the pupa develops, once it's almost ready to break out of the pupa stage, you can kind of begin to see the pattern on the sides of the cocoon. So for the blue morpho, for example, over here, you can see that the pattern of the wings kind of beginning to develop. And in just a second, I'll show you what the adult looks like. But the same thing would happen over here, and it was even in the butterfly chrysalis that we looked at just a minute ago as well. Here's the adult form of both of those. This is the blue morpho butterfly on the left, super bright blue one, beautiful insect, and then the Luna moth over here on the right. And the last stage for complete metamorphosis is the same as incomplete, finally emerges as an adult. However, it's the full-grown insect with a complete change in form. That's the big difference here that we got to make sure we remember. This is a full-grown insect with a complete change in form. This monarch butterfly over here on the left looks nothing like the monarch butterfly larva. Okay, there's a complete change. And then same thing here with the ladybug. Okay, the adult ladybug looks nothing like the larva form because it's been through that pupa stage where everything was broken down and then rebuilt back in a totally different shape. I actually do have a fun fact about monarch butterflies, but we'll actually get to that hopefully next week. So that's kind of a teaser. Make sure you come back next week. Couple other examples. We have butterflies, moths, ants, silkworms, which I know many of you experimented with in second grade, I believe. Beetles, ladybugs, bees, and obviously more. That's just a few of the examples. You do want to make sure you have all of those written down. If you're doing the handwritten notes, here is what it should look like. Okay, this is where my incomplete metamorphosis notes stopped, and then below that I have my new title, complete metamorphosis, on the left column, and then all of my specific notes here. Got a little crammed here, but that's okay. I kind of forgot to put the butterfly chrysalis and then moth cocoon thing there, and obviously started running out of space down here. If you have more space or you need to go to a new page or you were able to fit it all onto one page, that's totally fine. Just make sure you've written everything that I've written, however that looks on your paper. But that's all I have for you for the metamorphosis lesson. Monday, we will most likely look at some videos and different types of questions regarding metamorphosis. But make sure you keep these notes if you have your binder, which hopefully you should. It should go in the notes section behind notes number 4, because again, this is notes number 5. So hopefully we'll see you all very soon. And if not, we'll keep studying on Monday.